Hi, Allie. Thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I appreciate your taking the time, and I'm excited to hear a little bit more about you and what what lights you up, what inspires you.
Yeah. Well, lately it is this midlife transition.
Mm.
As we were talking about before we hopped on, I have gone through menopause early. I'm about to turn 45 on Sunday.
Mm.
So I feel like I'm really at that turning point, and I feel like it's this big spiritual threshold that there's like layers and
Mm.
tangles. And I was reading this interview. I forget the actress's name, but the quote that struck me, she was saying, when you're going through menopause and midlife, it's like all the and girls you were before kind of come out to play. And
Wow.
I love that. I wish I could remember because of the brain fog. I can't remember who said it.
Totally.
But I thought that is such an interesting idea. And I've
Mm.
noticed that I've reconnected with my athleticism. And believe it or not, in my mid 40s, I went to a high school that was pretty competitive and I wasn't like a top athlete. So, because diet culture was our default, it was kind of like, oh, you just start exercising to lose weight. And I
Yeah.
found here in midlife, I'm reconnecting with the athlete that doesn't need to make a team, that is not
Mm.
really as concerned about weight anymore. And it's like my truly competitive nature at the gym. I feel like I'm meeting that like 10-year-old girl. So that's one way that I'm just really curious and passionate about like what is like do we get to return to all the things that we missed or that we didn't get to, take up because of culture or our circumstances. So,
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's such an interesting thing because I feel like, yeah, because of culture, because of whatever family stuff, just how you were raised too, like some of those parts of us, the 10-year-old, the adventurous, I have a very rebellious teenage, angry part. um, that they do, I think, as we open up as humans and as midlife women, those parts come forward.
yeah, it's
Mhm.
almost as if like our wholeness is more intact, that we can hold them even if they don't fit into
Yeah.
really how we thought they had to fit back then.
Yes, yes, yes. I think that's a beautiful way of describing it. So I know, you share pretty openly, in your bio, but also just through stuff I've seen on, your social media presence, is that you ended up with cancer pretty early on in your life, right?
Yes, I was 13 years old. Hmm.
Wow. Wow. God,
Yeah.
talk about teenage angst. That must have been really hard.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you just taking in to be like, wow, I had a good girlfriend. She was just diagnosed with breast cancer, and she texted me saying, Allie, I can't believe you went through this at 13. And I cried. I was like, oh my God, I didn't think I realized how much it made me feel separate
Oh,
until
yeah.
now, being at this age that other people are going through the same experience.
Mm.
So I did at that age, the goal was being cured. And again, I'm the first generation of childhood cancer survivors. I'm so grateful
Yeah.
that Western medicine, it saved my life. And I just wanted to be normal. But what I realized through my emotional eating and binging was that there's a difference between being cured and being healed.
Yeah.
And I think I'm still unpacking that.
Sure.
Years later. But yeah, it was a lot, but I just wanted to be normal. I didn't want to be worried about, the meaning of life and days are short. I mean, that certainly those seeds were planted, but I think I just kind of had to stuff them down because I wanted to return to some sort of normalcy.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, like, I feel like that is the teenage sort of mindset and mission is like, let me just fit in. Let me just be just like everybody else.
Yeah.
And when we don't feel that, that can be really challenging. And yeah, not a lot of space to unpack how hard that must have been at that time.
Yeah, yeah. And again, medically, they were so happy that we were alive. And same here. Again, so grateful. But now there's emotional resources for kids, and I'm so grateful for that. But
Mm.
for us, I remember there was one cancer support group that my mom took me to, but it was for a lot of terminal patients, and a lot of people were in their 60s. And so then I felt even more alone because,
Yeah,
I was like, I can't relate
this
to the
isn't me.
60-year-old. Yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
I'm so glad there's so much more robust, support systems now. But I was diagnosed in 1992, and that just wasn't available back then. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so a lot of those issues came out through food.
Right. Well, and I feel like it's funny. I was thinking about my relationship with food before we came into this conversation, and thinking about like in my family, um, there was always food available, but like the food that was probably not that good for us, like soda and, treats, we it was almost like you this is yours. Like we were given, like, you get your own bottle of soda, you get your own candy. And so I always almost felt like I had to like protect it. Like, this
Mm.
has to be mine. Like, I can't let anybody else know that there's any left, because then they're going to take it, which is such a funny, I think about it in my adult life too. Like, I would like, not anymore, but I would like hide chocolate if I bought it because I didn't want my kids to eat it. So I'm like, this is mine.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
somebody's gonna steal it from me. But but um but just emotional eating, I know how prevalent that is as a therapist for sure, and how much shame is wrapped around food and eating and body size and all of it. Like, would love to sort of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think, that's one of, like, the biggest things, because I had a lot of shame around it, because I was like, "I'm so disciplined in every area of my life," which I would later realize that was actually part of the problem, which I can
Mhm.
talk about. But what
Yeah.
I've realized is that so much of this shame is because we don't understand the deeper connection that, or I should say, relationship to food, and food really represents belonging. And so, if you think about as you grow up, both as a teenager, but in your family, right? Food is coupled with belonging, right? And
Mm.
developmentally, when we are younger, we need to be chosen. We can't survive on our own. We need to really be in this role of please like me. And I know that that gets a bad rap, and it's developmentally appropriate at those ages.
Oh,
That's part of how
absolutely.
we form our identity in relation to other people, and being part of a group, and that's not always a bad thing. So if you think about your earliest memories of food, and if people listening think about it, whenever I ask clients or do workshops, there's like four main themes, right? Often food is associated with accomplishment and reward when we got
Mhm.
recognized for something, right?
Yep.
Like, I remember being afraid to jump off the diving board at swimming lessons, and my dad being like, "If you do it, we'll go to Dunkin' Donuts." And I was like, fear averted. I'm like cannonballing. And that's not inherently a bad thing, right? We all need to be recognized. Or I did this program with Pizza Hut in public school. It was like, if you read 5 books, you got a
Mm.
free personal pan pizza called Book It. It was called Book It. So a
Oh,
lot of
I
us, and
love
I'm sure you can you think of something that,
Oh, totally. Like, yeah. Well, I think about raising my own kids, like good report card. You get to go out to dinner, right? We'll
yes,
go, we'll take you
yeah,
to what
yeah.
you get to pick the restaurant, right?
Yeah, and it's so important to be recognized, and food is one way that we're saying, "Oh, we belong here. We're contributing. We're making
Mm.
people happy." The
Yeah.
other theme around food is it really grounds us in uncertain times. In Ayurvedic, a tradition which is more holistic, more metaphorical, food is earth. It is mother, right? And we think of earth as our original, ancestor, in a
Right.
way. We all
Sure.
come from there. And so during communions, bat mitzvahs, funerals, times of uncertainty, even the seasons change.
Yeah.
Food orients us. Oh, you are
Mhm.
part of this culture. You are here. Here's where you are, the ritual within the bigger context of your community. And
Mm.
thank God. And I think that's something beautiful that food can offer.
Yeah.
Then what often gets, I think, in the emotional eating space gets kind of like, you shouldn't use food for comfort. But when you think about it, from as babies, when we're born, food is immediately coupled with comfort, as it should be, right? As
Right.
babies, we have two primal needs, to be touched and to be fed.
Yeah.
And being fed is and being hungry is so uncomfortable. And when
Mhm.
we're fed by our caretakers, we know we're safe. We're going to survive, right?
Right.
So that's a beautiful thing that we can
Yeah.
get that message when we don't have an intellect yet. We're not narrating our lives. We're just like all nervous system, right?
Right, right. We're just right. We are just all just respond and yeah, react. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, and so then the fourth theme is around connection, right? Like often this is like, oh, people eat when they're lonely, and we can talk about that, but again, originally food shows us, oh, I'm with my people. It's a birthday party, it's a Thanksgiving, it's the Super Bowl. I mean, we can
Yeah,
talk about how it's, but it's like I'm
sure. But or
connecting.
family dinners, right? Sort of
Family
more
dinner,
regular.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think a lot of family dinners, right, are like, is the conversation comfortable? Is everything being said that needs to be said, right?
Mhm.
And so there's this invisible through line of belonging that often then as adults, we have an opportunity to evolve and individuate. And I think this especially comes out in midlife of saying, okay, this was a foundation, but what do I choose now? So,
Mm.
and once and that is a developmental leap. And so part of that is, what do we want food to be about anymore? Right.
Yeah,
And it doesn't mean it will always be those things around recognition and accomplishment and orienting us and connection and comfort. But if we're going to that during times where maybe like if we always feel like we're just as adults, it often tracks as like, well, I'm just always working and working. And
yeah,
then I deserve this eating at night. At midlife, it's the time to say, like, am I really enjoying all of this work? What, where, how do I start to enjoy the process versus just trying to jump off the diving board to get to the
yeah.
to get
The
to Dunkin' Donuts?
reward. Yeah,
Yeah. Or
yeah, yeah.
if I'm reading, what books do I want to read rather than just getting to the accomplishment of 5 books, right?
Yeah.
And so that is where these primal needs for belonging aren't going anywhere. And so food, I really talk about is safety. And when we're turning to it, it's like it makes so much sense. And I think that's the first step in unshaming this of like, why does this make sense? If you know what I just, I obviously gave a brief thumbnail of, but like, okay,
Yeah.
you have these primal needs of belonging as kids and as adults. It all makes so much sense. So first we just need to start there, I think. And I wish I would have known that when I was binging and emotionally eating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think about too, like um for kids who um either their, food was scarce or food was withheld or you were looked upon if your, body size didn't fit what the rest of the family was and you were eating more or less than everybody else. Like there's so much emotional tie to the food, to eating, to food, to yeah, there's just so much that gets connected to it just through family dynamic.
Yeah, well, and that's a huge, even if parents are like, I don't want to pass this along to my kids or and again, that this is that's a recent development. I think
Yeah,
most of us who are coming at midlife now all grew up in diet culture because our parents, there wasn't diversity of media. We have to remember that, right?
sure.
And so it's like, I know my parents thought that health, and my mom had like grown up on an organic farm. It wasn't called organic at the time, and my dad grew up very poor, very food insecure, struggled with his weight because he was on government food. And it was like and he was heavy as a kid. And so, and he was a health and phys ed teacher. And so they really valued health. But back then, health was defined as thinness, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
so even though my parents never said anything to me, my dad would say, I'm running from the fat man every morning, or he would describe people by their size. And so
Totally.
you pick up on that as a kid, and then you go to the doctors, and so
Mhm.
it is very much, obviously there's this deeper through line of belonging, but there's also the more concrete of like, do I belong based on my body size, or what
Yeah.
my family is valuing here?
Yeah.
um and it's, yeah, so for sure, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I know that a lot of the work you do helps people sort of create a better relationship with themselves around food, I think, and
Yes.
eating and yeah, and diet and if you could describe a little bit about yeah, what you do and how it undoes some of this stuff that's been done to us or whatever that has built up over time.
Yeah, well, part of it is starting to really look at food outside of the calories in, calories out meaning, and tying it to weight loss. And
Mm,
that's something that's easier said than done. But I think because we're talking to wise women, we often know that we learn that the obstacle is the path, right?
yeah.
So for me, I was starting to think like, oh, thinness is healthy. And it's ironic, like I was the thinnest I ever was on chemotherapy, but I didn't make that connection because of the culture, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah.
God, the sickest I ever was when I was the thinnest, but culture, and then of course your parents and there's so many layers to this.
Mm,
So one of the first things is that we start doing is really starting to get to why does it make sense? So what are the root issues here? Because it is about the food, but it's not about the food. And so one of the first things is really figuring out what foods work for you, and not from a weight loss standpoint, but literally from how you eat at one meal sets up how you're going to feel for the next 3 to 4 hours. So
mm,
part of it is starting to actually think, what's feels good versus what I was told was good. And
yeah.
so when you start to tell people, hey, let's start tracking. If you're gonna, I do experiments with food, because the whole thing is you have to learn to trust your body. So I'm not going to tell you what to eat, but I'm going to give you a
Mm,
structure to figure it out.
mm,
So I give people, start with breakfast. All right, do steel cut oats with, some raisins and whatever, or try eggs and avocado, right? And I use a framework according to nervous system. So people have different nervous systems that need different types of diets.
mm,
And I say, for the next 3 to 4 hours, I want you to look at your mood. Is it more stable? Because a lot of people have anxiety because their blood sugar is crashing. So it's like, do you have an absence of anxiety that maybe you never knew was possible to have? Do you
mm,
feel satiated? Do you
mhm.
feel calm? And do you arrive at your next meal like with a healthy sense of hunger instead of hangry? And so
Yeah.
we just and my master's degree is actually in like adult change and learning. And
Mm,
adults actually need pretty quick results to stick with something. And we think results means weight loss, but I'm like, no, I want you to start to see why this food can be medicine for you, how it can make
mm,
your life easier, make your life better,
wow.
versus what you're going to look like. And again, it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that all of a sudden wanting to lose weight disappears, but we're going to try to start to center, oh my god, I want to do this for me. um
Yeah. Yeah. Like almost like how do I best nourish my body, myself, my soul, my
yes,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I love that you mentioned soul, because it's how we eat is also symbolizing how we're relating to ourselves. So for example, when people are eating alone and in secret, right, symbolically they're really feeling separate
Yeah.
and alone in some way, right? And so that's also the work that I do with clients, which I find is like the food is actually the easy part. It's like,
Mm,
I mean, we're in this
yeah.
era of like keto, vegan. It's like actually not that complicated once you start listening to your body and you do a couple of experiments. Now, it gets more complicated if you're in perimenopause or you're not sleeping. I don't want to diminish that complexity, but
Mm,
the real complexity comes around like, okay, where, what, the work I do with clients is like, where is your story active that makes you feel like you don't belong? And that can be really hard because, again, developmentally, people often think they're self aware, but they're self monitoring what they think other people are going to think. And
Sure.
so often people will eat at night, and it's not about what just happened right before then that they're eating, right? Versus like one of my clients, she's like, I ended up in the refrigerator just staring there. And I'm like, I'm not hungry. How did I get here? But I'm going to eat it. Eat. And I'm like, well, I'm like, what felt hard about that moment? What felt hard? Oh, I was rehearsing like 4 different conversations I had with 4 different people and wondering what was the outcome of that gonna be? So it was like all this stuff ahead of that she kinda just pushed on through, and then when
Right.
there was finally space, but this is a belonging issue at the end of the day. She was worried about how she was gonna be perceived, right? And if because especially women, we're conditioned to want people to like us, and there's nothing, again, inherently wrong with that. I think in our
Yeah.
culture, it's like, "Don't care what other people think," and it's like, well, okay, first of all, we need everybody, and
Yep.
second of all, women are pretty savvy that we are judged in a different way, right? So
Yeah.
often what we think of as an inner critic is really an inner protector, being
Yeah.
like, you
Oh,
know yeah, so
yeah.
it's this complete reframe is like you can trust yourself more, but
Mm.
ultimately what and I think this invitation of midlife where you're like, okay, I really get that I'm not gonna that time is and I'm not time running out in a scarcity way, but like there's a
Yeah.
yeah, and
And there is an
yeah.
end.
Yeah, and, estrogen, if you're through menopause, you don't have as much estrogen, so you don't care as much.
Right.
There's a real psychological shift around that, our
Yeah.
hormones, but it's starting to think about, "What do I choose? How do I wanna show up here?"
Mm.
And it's starting to value really the process more. It's really starting to value what's important to us here more, right? And it starts with redefining how we value food at first, right? Okay, let's take it out of just weight loss. How can it be
Mm.
medicine? Or when do I really want it to be connection, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I don't care about connecting at work over the bagels, but I do need connection. And what type of connection do I value?
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
a lot of my clients hate small talk. I hate small talk. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
showing up somewhere where I'm around people, I actually feel more alone because loneliness is about our social needs getting met. So
Right.
it's really starting to see like what feels hard about the situation that makes me want to turn to food and
Mm.
then starting to belong to ourselves first and accessing our own needs and turning inward. And then the food takes care of itself. You don't have to white knuckle. You don't need more rules. It just, you start to build a more mature version of safety, specifically psychological safety and belonging, which
Mm.
is really you having your own back and that you
Yeah.
can trust that you're going to advocate for yourself. And I really think of like treating yourself like, and taking care of yourself like you want to be taken care of.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. Yeah. Well, and like to like for me, the that food can be like a complement to my life. Like it doesn't have to be, I don't have to be monitoring and weighing every single thing that goes into my body. And I can, if I'm paying attention to what I'm eating and noticing what makes me feel good, it's a lovely relationship that doesn't feel judgmental. It feels just like, ah, this is nice. Like I enjoy I'm trying to think what I have. I usually eat oatmeal and fruit for breakfast. I love it. Like I could eat that every day and it makes me feel good. Um and on the weekends, if I want to have an egg and bacon or whatever, like it's okay to like that fills me up versus like, oh, am I keeping score of what came into my body and how much I exercised?
yeah, and the research shows actually that the more you think about weight, the worse the outcomes.
Mm,
And I think we have this underlying belief that the harder we work, the more results we'll get. I mean, that's in America, this
that's
meritocracy myth.
oh,
Yeah.
capitalism at its best.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Keep you working. But what I work on with my clients is actually the more food noise you have, the worse the results. And I discovered that with myself. It's like, oh, the more I monitor and think and plan, I think I'm actually doing the work, but it's not productive because really it's fueled by uncertainty and doubt versus, so I really help clients realize that food noise comes from either your blood sugars crashing.
Yep.
And that's a real biological limit that you have to learn how to manage. And that's just figuring out the right foods for yourself. But then the other times when you're starting to think about food, and it's really that belonging risk, right? Like my client will be like, it's 3 o'clock and I'm starting to think about what I can eat when I get home from dinner. Oh, what's going on at 3 o'clock? What's happening? Like, let's get
Yeah.
curious. Like,
Yes.
are you feeling exhausted? Are you feeling uncertain? Are you feeling inadequate? Are you feeling lonely?
Mm,
It's the tail triggers that are like the top four. Pretty much 90% of eating comes back to, I call them what's at the tail end of your food noise. And
yeah.
let's start there and start to think, okay, if I'm feeling exhausted, tired, what do I need? Do I need to go get some sunshine? Do I need to move my body because I'm actually stagnant?
Right.
And rather than thinking that what I'm going to do, and this mirrors with food and exercise, like you think like the harder you work, you should be burnout, right? Like if good exercise counts if it's like sweaty and you hate it and you're exhausted. Meanwhile, it's like
Right.
that causes like then want a reward, and then you're also like have overstressed your body. So physiologically, you're just going to crave more carbs. But
Right.
it's like, how do you actually feel more energized by what you're going to do?
Mm,
So it's starting to start with those really small needs that often your body has that we've overridden them because we live in a very cerebral, culture, and that's what's rewarded. But
yep.
coming back into our body and really starting to choose yourself and what you need in those moments.
Mm,
Um, and it over time, answering those needs, really you start to like trust that you have your own back. Now,
yes.
yeah, so I'll leave that there because there is like a catch, of course. It's never that easy.
No, no, but I love the sort of coming back to yourself, trusting your body, um, because I think I feel like especially my generation, like so disconnected from my body for so much of my life to just like other than what I looked like in the mirror, right? Not tapping into how I was feeling, what was happening emotionally. Yeah. That I feel like what you shared is like a message that I feel like I share again and again and again with clients is that like to build the trust inside means you have to listen. You got to like feel. Yeah.
Yeah. And it can be complicated, right? Like again, because
Yes.
and I'll use food because that's my wheelhouse, but it's like a lot of times people feel anxious because their blood sugar is dropping. Like my
Right.
clients realize like 80%, like 50, maybe 50% is more fair. 50% of their quote unquote emotional eating is they're just not eating the right foods for themselves. Like they think they try to be vegetarian, but they need animal protein. They think they shouldn't eat carbs, but they need complex carbs. So
Right.
it's like, and then once you get that physicality part of it, then it's easier to like, okay, when I go in there, what am I feeling? And I think what the work that I do around story is a little bit harder because, and guess I can get technical with you, but
Yeah.
often in the emotional eating space, they say, oh, just feel your feelings for 90 seconds and they will go away. But that's technically an emotion. That's like a sensation of discomfort. But if emotion is attached to some sort of meaning, it becomes a story,
Yeah.
and that feels chronic. So you can't even start to see, oh, I can feel any different because it's just the water you're swimming in. So in my
Yeah.
Truth with Food work, we really spend the first half of the program, 3 months, literally trying to get yourself distance
Mm,
from how you're perceiving and feeling about like a chronic tension that you might not have ever known you were living with because it's been with you for decades. So that's where like it's like, oh, now I can see I'm reacting this way, I'm feeling this way. But that's like, for example, one of the things, this a story that I really had to work on in midlife. As I was telling you, I was postpartum. I had my son at 41
mm,
and I was going through menopause at the same time. Definitely challenging. And I found that I couldn't work the way that I used to. So I no longer overate. I've never drank. I don't like to spend money. Like overworking was my last vice.
yeah.
And I did my own process, right, on me to be like, well, I know I need to slow down. I know I need more rest. I want to enjoy my son more. Why can't I stop overworking? And for me, I had this like deep story about needing to be exceptional. And that is really what got me recognition in life, like
Yeah.
academically. So it tracks with work, as an adult. But I
Yeah.
didn't understand that I was taking in the whole world through this like unconscious. It's not because it necessarily was deep, but we're always taking shortcuts, right? So like everything I was doing was like, I got to do it the best, and not everything, I should say. I don't, there's a lot of things I do not compete about, but in
Yeah.
work and
Yeah.
everything being to a certain standard, and it's like, oh, once I could see that, it's
Mm,
like, oh my God, that was running so much. And it, so you have to be able to see it, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so it's a little bit more
totally.
complicated, and really starting to pick my own metrics of what matter around me with my work, because I don't want that running my life and controlling me anymore.
Totally. Totally. Well, I think about I was just in a group, coaching group earlier where somebody was sharing, but the people say this about therapy too, like as you sort of unpack the onion, delayer the onion, that there's more layers beneath that. And like as you get to the center, like those core beliefs or those core stories that you hold, like that's where the work can be, right? To
Yes, that is it. Yeah. And that's why I say food is the obstacle in the path, because it will point you to these
Mhm.
stories. And that's actually the protective resistance. Is this is not about these stories not being true or not. Sometimes in the coaching world, it's very binary, like, oh,
Oh, totally. Just
yeah,
think your
yeah,
way through it. Right.
yeah.
Have a
Or
better,
or
yeah.
yeah, or wrap around, into this mindset. And I'm like, but actually you need
Yes.
discernment and nuance and
Oh,
context.
100%.
Because the reality is, if I continued to work, I probably would get more results. And so
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's not true. And, I had to start asking myself questions like, is this enough? What is enough? And so the protective resistance is like, can I still be recognized? I first have to recognize and reward myself for what I value at this midlife stage, which,
Right.
like, before having a kid and also midlife, I didn't value my time as much. I could just work on the weekends. I could bounce back. Cannot do that anymore. Right? So it's like,
Yes,
okay.
yes, yes.
So how do I incorporate this new emergent set of values? And if I can't see this story, I can't understand why I keep doing the thing that I don't want to be doing.
Yeah,
Uh, and so
totally.
it's adding more texture to the story, rather than being like, that was wrong and you were wrong. And again, I think so much of, and I can only speak to coaching, I'm not in the therapy world, but so much of it is binary and like telling and like reshaming people versus like your stories have served you
Oh,
so well.
so served you.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, which is what I love about, which I talk about on the podcast, that, internal family systems or IFS is all about like honoring all the parts of you, even the parts that, yeah, maybe have been super critical or overworking or whatever. They serve a purpose and they've worked really hard to keep you safe and following the right path and, not getting hurt, even though we can't ever fully protect ourselves from that. But yeah, they have a job that's really important. And yeah, it's like, yeah, mindset and just give yourself some positive affirmations. Like, well, if you don't believe them, you're just setting up more conflict internally, right?
Well, and they're also not often true. So
Right. Well,
I'm like
that
a
too.
so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's a
Oh,
whole other
Allie.
podcast, right?
Yeah. Yes, that is a whole, we can talk about that all on its
Yeah,
own. So, I have just loved this conversation so much. You're so easy to talk to, but
you are too.
what if you had a little slice of wisdom that you thought was important to share with the listeners? What might that be?
Yeah, I really think food is inviting you into deeper healing, physically, emotionally, and on the soul level. And the one question I think always leaving people with is like, next time you're frustrated with your eating, next time you want to go beat yourself up and think, how do I fix this? I want you to ask yourself, why does this make sense?
Mm.
Why does this make sense? And keep asking yourself. And the answer might not come right away, because if you're in shame or you're in fight or flight, you can't think of that. but it will unfurl if you keep asking yourself that question. And I think it's really important to start that different orientation because it's not one that we're taught. So I
That
think
is so true.
why does this make sense is
Mm,
so, so important. What we think of self-sabotage is really self-protection, and it makes so much sense once you can unpack it, with someone who understands it a holistic way. But you can start to do that for yourself. Just
yeah.
why does this make sense?
Mm, nice. Love that. So, if people wanted to know more about your program and working with you, how would they find you?
Yeah, well, I have a podcast, Insatiable, which I think is a really great place to start. And then on my website, alishapiro.com, I have a comfort eating quiz so people can identify what kind of comfort eater they are.
Yeah.
And then once a month, I offer free community gatherings around these kind of question topics. It's
Okay.
usually open Q&A. So if you're like, what do you mean this makes sense? You want some help, come to the call. You
Nice.
can go to alishapiro.com/gathering. And on the first Tuesday of every month, I have those. And then on Instagram, I'm at Ali, ALIM Shapiro, SHAPIRO. Although I'm less and less on there these days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to protect my time.
Yeah, that is the truth. Talk about a time suck it can be. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That is awesome. Well, thank you so, so much for being here. I appreciate your, I don't know, the word that comes to mind is like gentleness around this topic of food and eating and health. And that's really lovely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was hard earned. It was hard won.
Well, I feel like those of us that have won hard are the best teachers or the best guides, right?
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure. For sure. Thank you
Okay.
for saying that. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome.